significantly contributing to various HCI areas. So we know you from mobile HCI, from like auto UI, social acceptability, etc. And you're very active in the research communities. So we are in the steering committee of several conferences. Like I think for me was most visible mobile HCI, but like as I mentioned, auto UI. And I think it's also worth to mention that you are really active in supporting females in like our research area, and you are one of the like most visible female HCI persons in Germany. And so it's really our pleasure to have you here. And we start with the first question. Your research includes technology for work and society. And could you explain how you think technology can improve work and society? So probably you have some examples or visions how these fields may look in 10 years or probably even more.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for the nice introduction. I'm so happy to be here and talk with you about like mixed reality and health and other areas. So, well, the vision for the future is always not so easy, but I think a few examples from our own work is probably that we will have a much smarter collaboration between machines and humans. I think if you look at robotics in, let's say, production or car manufacturing, the real cool robotics are caged in because they're kind of dangerous. And the little tiny small things that are your companion that walk around. But I think in both cases, a real cooperation, a seamless cooperation where the robot knows the human intent and the human knows what the robot wants, and each other sort of covers the abilities of the human and the robot, that is not yet arrived. And I think this will be much more natural in healthcare, in production lines, but maybe also in our practice space. If you walk up to an administration desk, a robotic system may just easily interact with you and you find it natural and convenient. I think that is we're just at the beginning, because now the technology is ready for that. And I think what I also envision is that in 10 years, we have established a vision of how do we interact with automation. I think you can see again, there's a big debate on ethics in automation, on control. That is one side, but also I hope that we will discuss and maybe have an image of what are our norms of interacting with a robot. Can I kick a robot? Should I cut the way of an automated vehicle? I think we're just at the beginning of seeing how humans and automated systems, which are appearing in all of our spaces of private and professional life, how will this actually interaction shape with a non-human partner, which however becomes an everyday partner in our lives. And maybe a third vision that we also see coming is the role of your location. I think Corona has given an enormous push to the question of remote cooperation. It was there before anyway, but I think there's a big drive now. So maybe your expertise is not where it is needed. So I'm located here, but I might be an expert in a certain topic. So today there's a video conference to get me in, but in 10 years there will be immersive technology to just sort of let me immerse into an operating room, into a production line, into any kind of a situation. Maybe also immersively visit your grandparents, so that the location doesn't play a role anymore, and that I can share my expertise, my time, maybe also my social presence with people and individuals independent of my location. And maybe I can then decide where I want to live, because for work, maybe, or at least for some parts of my work, I go virtually.
Yeah.
So one point, just if I dig deeper, we have a lot of questions written up, but I think we have had sort of the basically going with the flow. I have this one question of social presence and virtual social presence, and I think in healthcare, this is really a tricky one. So I think what we have seen over the last month is that we have learned to be social present through VR without being really present. So I think many of us have now managed to be in multiple conferences at the same time without people really realizing, etc. So I think this question, I think this being attentive to a person, which I think is in the very nature of care. How can we really ensure that with the new technologies that we are sort of advertising at the moment, sort of that we are advocating forward, how can we make sure that this is not getting sort of much worse of an experience for people, that we really lose this connection, that we lose the social part of it, even though we call it social? What do we need, or do current technologies support that?
I think there's two sides. So one is, how do we act individually? Even in previous times, I could have attended a meeting and I was pretending to take notes in my computer while I was maybe just typing stuff and was actually distracted. So I think this is more or less now the virtual version, what you were just indicating, what is happening. And I, of course, can put an example. You can phone someone and pretend to listen and then give some comments, but while you have to say, no, I have to cook in parallel and I'm in my kitchen and I'm kind of busy with something. So the time you are sharing and the dedication and the thoughts you're giving is one thing. The other thing is presence really there. And I would say, no, the technology is not perfect for that. I really like a very old paper that was studying like a low threshold connection between grandparents and parents, and that was the family window, where there was a space in the room of both households, and there was a 24-hour camera on, and that was very interesting, and because it was low threshold and it was clear I can connect at any time, and if I don't want, there was blinds, but it was always on. And technology today doesn't found a good way to balance these connections. I think we did this storytelling story box where grandparents could connect with a physical artifact. But I think the connection, the bonding, and the social exchange and the social intimacy, in some sense, is still not there by technology. And I think there's a lot to do. One element is more immersion. Do you really feel of being there? Am I sitting in the armchair besides my grandparents? And do I feel it? And do I really spend and dedicate time? Or is it just like a phone call, which is 2D, and it's not like being there? I think that's what I'm still missing, that the technology is offering a better way of connecting, because the 2D screen is this only in a very limited fashion to really make an emotional and social connection. That is something we will still need. And it's interesting that I think the upcoming Alexa I'm looking forward has a digital display which is actually moving around with you. So if you are, let's say, in your room, it is actually this is at least what the system promises. Sort of, it's moving out. So it's a little bit sort of, you are really in the focus, and I can check, and the system is going around. I'm looking forward to see if this is actually creating a better sense, where both sides need a low threshold system and not having a VR glasses around. But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of research to be done. I don't see a full solution for that. And
so I put in the link to the paper you were mentioning into the.
Thank you very much.
So this is a 2010 Kai paper. Yeah. There has been a lot of studies on these sort of virtual presence. And I think what struck me, and that's sort of also a research method question, I have seen many of those things when they were deployed for the studies. And then I read the papers which said that this is so great, nobody wants to live without it anymore. And a year later, when you asked the people, is it running? And they said, no, it was too much effort. And I think this is also an interesting question from our research perspective. Many of those things probably need a longer term usage in order to really get it right. And I think COVID has given us the chance or the challenge, you can see it, that we have a longer term friendship with remote teaching, with remote collaboration. I think a larger experiment than I think ever we would have ever expected.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's the same. I think with one tool, this Storybox, there was actually one example where one person, also on one side of this connection between the grandparents and the grandchildren, the grandfather was actually playing the trumpet, and the tool had also an audio message. So he was playing a trumpet piece as a farewell to the box. That was pretty sweet. But you were right, these systems have never been installed over a longer time. But unfortunately, we should have now brought up all our old tools and install them at the same time to get now this for free long-term studies.
And I put a Storybox link also in the.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would a bit go forwards the issues with cameras. Like Susanne, you and Marion, you investigated a lot, critical aspects of having cameras everywhere, and I think it's also about mics and the phones and Alexa, etc. So cameras can, of course, help to connect people. We are using cameras all currently, and they will be in the future built in cars. Like near to Berlin, Tesla built a new factory, and we know that there are cameras like in London City, everywhere, etc. So can you a bit talk about the aspects of social acceptance and also how much we adapt to, because it seems that the younger generation at least is more open than probably us.
I think that is a very interesting debate. I think when I first tried out the Google Glass, I was not so excited. I'm personally on the privacy side, but the world was so excited. This is a cool thing, and everybody will be wearing it, and you will get used to it, and don't bother about privacy. And I didn't believe it, but well, you had to see and you had to wait. And then with the work that also specifically Mario and Kölle was doing in my team was looking at this not only from a design perspective, but also over a temporal distance. And she could show in over the time that the adoption of technology with cameras did not work the same way, like as she, for example, is referring to with iPods. In the beginning, when there was this someone would be wearing earphones in the public, would be strange. Now you see these big things and nobody ever cares. And I also saw work from you where people would be wearing VR glasses in the tram, which is cool. But I think with cameras, it was completely different. And I think it stays in the same way. Different cameras in public is still an issue. I do understand that different countries have maybe a little bit of a different attitude, but if you really talk to people, they do not want to be observed. Why do people switch off their cameras even in Zoom? Is sometimes I have a bad hair day was a bit of a phrase in the beginning, says no, it's because at some point I looked into my face as well. Am I looking so tired really? And I thought I switched off the camera. I said I'm looking really too tired today, and I want to share this with everyone the whole day. So one element is the camera is a special issue, and we showed that with the camera, specifically if it's body worn, you can design for acceptance. It's not this either yes or no. It's not you wear a Google Glass or Google Glass is forbidden. It's a question how you design technology. Is the technology showing I am here? Is it offering you an opportunity to, do you accept? Do you sort of agree to this? Or even the bigger privacy eye construction that we did together with Andreas Bulling and his team, where it is actually showing, it's really closing an eyelid saying, look, this conversation is now private. And I think that was very important. So we have to design camera technology with social acceptability in mind, not only the legal aspects, but also the acceptability aspects. And you can really see that people do care. It was very interesting, for example, that in German pool areas, public pool areas, it's now forbidden to take pictures and in public of people. And last year, there was with the Corona pandemic, the public pool was very open in small slots, and only a few people were allowed. So when the slot was over, the whole pool was almost empty, and I was taking pictures of that place. And then one people walked up to me and said, "You know, you should not be taking pictures." I said, "Yes, but this is the unique moment. It's summertime. It's like 30 degrees, and the thing is empty. You know, this has never happened in my lifetime, because this is in the summer. It is populated." But it shows a high awareness, and I think this is absolutely there, and I don't think this is going away. And the same with cars. I don't think this will change. People have a strong opinion about them being recorded, and I would say it became even stronger than less. And with regard to the young people, I think we are carrying around too much of cliches about old and young. In healthcare, it's also like the elderly, they don't like technology. It's like the younger, they are more relaxed. I don't see this. I see my young nieces also be more careful on Facebook, being more considerate what they share, being more careful about their private life. And so I would say you have, well, for example, with cameras, you can design for social acceptability in certain areas. So you don't have to give up on cameras, but you have to carefully design it. And you have to look for clear, not only legal, but also, let's say, social and individual consent of using them, and give an option of opt-out.
So let me dig down on that a bit deeper, because I think what we see in healthcare is that basically, if you have one-to-one healthcare, the healthcare worker will see a lot of things. So very personal things, be it with hygiene, be it with care. So if we think of a care home or in a hospital. And now if we have assistive technologies who make life easier for the care worker or even take over some of the tasks, very clear that many of those tasks are not feasible without a camera, so that we have sort of, and for me, one of the questions is it really the camera? Or is it sort of how we use the camera? And I think this brings this acceptability. So basically, if I have a robot arm that has 5 cameras on it in order to not hurt me, is this sort of a camera to people, or is this not a camera to people? I think these questions, what is sort of, perhaps putting it 2 questions, what is the difference of people directly observing things versus cameras? And the other thing is sort of the way we use the images, is if it's very clear for what we use them. What difference does this make?
I think an enormous difference. When we were creating our smart home lab environment, that is almost 10 years ago. In the beginning, we thought of mounting cameras, because that would be an easy observation method. And if you today come and visit us and you would get a tour through that lab, you get immediately an indication that the cameras here in the living room are only if we do studies, because we have the legal obligation to supervise studies. But studies were immediately removed. And one element, as you were indicating, is what am I using the camera for, and what kind of processing on the data of the camera do I have to do? Because if you look at the technology, you can do a lot of image processing on the actual edge. You know, you could do it within the robot, and the robot would just use its images to self-calibrate, to avoid obstacles, or to grab something. But this doesn't necessarily have to be a live stream on Twitch, you know, so that you have to carefully sort of look at what you're doing with it. And I would say a camera that is guiding the robot is not an issue. It's not even a problem if you have a local nurse that is using an assistive technology, for example, for wound treatment, and is coordinating with a tele-expert at a central control or care station. It's also not a question. But if you have like a full-time camera in your bedroom where you change your clothes, or even in your bathroom, you really would have to explain if there is a really sufficient benefit, or if not, a pressure sensor, a motion sensor, a thermal sensor, a simple desk camera would do the same thing. You know, you would have to argue, do I really need a high resolution 4K image for what I want to do, or what I want to observe or assist?
I would have a question about, like, we talked about healthcare and caring about elderly people. And I think in Germany, it's just the case that we do not have enough money so that everybody who needs support gets a nurse or, you know, enough stuff. And I think other countries might have even like more serious issues with that. And we know that we can have technologies that also is sometimes perceived like humans. So most of us know Eliza from Weizenbaum, who was perceived to be a human. Like, how much do you think real humans, either, you know, co-located or remotely, can be replaced by technology?
Yeah, I think that is an interesting debate that we often hear. And I think I would have to say something first. I think in Germany and most of the countries, it is not about replacing a human nurse with a robot or an automated system. It's you have to look at the situation itself. I think in 2017, currently 2.4 million, about 3.4 million are needing care, and 70% of them are at home. And this will enormously increase, and I think in 2055, it's going to be 4.5. So there's a strong increase. At the same time, the number of people, even if we educate and even if we train, is not necessarily increasing the same way. We can even be happy if it's in the same, like if it stays the same today. So one thing is that expertise and personnel is not saying scarce, but it's not like available on a large scale. The economic cost of the health system is already pretty high, and I'm sure the German and other nations will be investing that, but there's a limit to everything. So I think we should not be talking about replacing a nurse with a human, but we should think of what is for the benefit of the health of the individual, a good technical solution in which sometimes a robot or an assistive system or a tele-remote visit is doing good, or a single robotic assistant at home, and the overall package of my personal health is still high and I get a good quality. And the second thing that I would like to say here is that we're still having this narrative of the nurse goes and I get this kind of artificial huge robot coming to my home, which is whatever it does. It can be pretty human, or it always is considered like a replacement for the human. I think together with Mark Hassenzahl and Jan Borchers and also Volker Wolf and Astrid von Rosenthal von Putten, we just published an interactions article on designing otherwhere. You know, if we're designing an assistant systems, we should not always consider designing it as a replacement of a human, but rather replacing it as a thing that is of help to me. And if this intelligent thing gets into a conversation with me and it does me good, why shouldn't I do it? You know, if a thing that can sense my mood and can sense that I really need someone or something to hold on, can it like give me an element I can caress and sort of I can express my needs and demands with that, but not necessarily always see it as a replacement, but see it as one element that is beneficial to my personal health, to my social needs, to my communication needs. So I wouldn't trade one thing for the other, but see what is right for which persons in which life situation. And if once you start all humanizing everything, you end up in betraying sometimes, you know, is it now still you? I would rather design it for comfort, design it for bonding, design something for a conversation or something playing chess with you.
And I just put also the link to otherware into the chat.
Thanks.
So perhaps let's move back a little bit to the mixed reality questions. And so one of the things is, and we had already in the conversation series, about social spaces, social virtual spaces. And I think this is one question in care. I think if we look back, and I think there's still countries around the world where if people are in in hospital, the family turns up and turns this into sort of their living room. And I think we had colleagues who even realized this in Germany. And so I think this idea that sort of care is not just sort of the health care, but this is sort of means sort of connectedness. How do you see how technologies come into play, and what are sort of promising approaches to make this a more social thing, the whole care aspect, especially also with elderly in particular?
Yeah, I think what is currently promising, but I think which will be a big challenge is still the question: can I use immersive or virtual reality or like mixed reality spaces to create that kind of bonding? I think we were currently successful in a research project, which kind of will now go into its final proposal phase, but where you are trying to connect with a relative, or where you can really use the entire chair and everything you are sitting in with immersion in textile elements, immersion with on-body like tactile or vibrotactile shirts with textures that change, and study if you really feel sitting there, not only see sitting, but if you really feel sitting there, if that can actually increase the relatedness. And I think the other element that is like same time immersion creating a bonding. The other element is if we should better and stronger elaborate on asynchronous connections. I think in a much previous work, we had this social flower where you could enter your apartment and you rub on that on the leaf of that plant, and then the other side receives a signal: I'm back home and I'm thinking of you. So if we introduce more lower threshold connections like this, for example, there was recently a defense. I was an external reviewer on unconventional user interfaces for long-term and long-distance relationships. Sort of think more of elements. What creates a bond? You know, is it the same memory? Is it touching something? It is a sense of being there. I think this is, I would say, by far not fully explored, and I would go into both directions. Make a same time stronger presence, so that we are really doing and experiencing something together. At the same time, also increase the number of emotional signals. So if you look to my back, for example, my parents have died, so I think they had a long and good life, but when they died, of course, the conversation dies. But there's a few things actually which I collected, which belong to my father's office, which is the old globe and a scale for letters. And it's like being in a conversation with him, because I knew what it meant to him, I knew where it was. And if you had elements like these who would be then kind of more interactive or showing something, you could connect with these artifacts with the loved ones.
So that's an argument that goes very much in the opposite direction of a lot of development we see at the moment with VR, where we try to have sort of even more real-time, even more realistic representations of avatars of people. Do you think it's sort of this whole continuum is sort of something we should investigate, or do you think we have looked, or sort of it's under-investigated, sort of the space that's on the sort of slower, less effort, less attention side? Because I think there has been some work 10, 15 years back in the tangibles community on this sort of low bandwidth communication, which you can do on the side. And I think this has not been improved in that much. And before you answer, so we haven't seen many questions coming in on the chat. So if you do have questions, please do not hesitate to put them in the chat. we'll put you on the microphone at some point to get you onto to ask the question. So please do not hesitate to put the questions in. But now back to the questions. This sort of, is it under research, this area of low bandwidth, low attention research? And what would be sort of good starting points? Because the counter argument to that is, this was so simple, people have already done it. They showed it scientifically, but it never really worked in real.
Yeah, because I think the transfer into real day practices hasn't been successful. Some, of course, because the technology was maybe not ready at that moment, maybe because it was maybe too specific for a certain kind of communication, and you don't want to have like 70 or 50 different kind of artifacts in your home. There was this not this only one element you could do. But I think there's also not a seamless integration into maybe from real-time, highly immersive presence into this, as you said, low threshold, just ambient communication. And I think what also this pandemic has shown me, I really like video conferences. But I don't know how many of you have the same experience, but I really want to run away from them very quickly. Like I had a long winter vacation, which I really enjoyed, with a lot of things, reading, doing crafting, doing things I really enjoy, meeting my family, not many others, you know, but it was really enjoyable being away from that. And I don't think that people like to have even more fully audio visual connections as long as the technology, and it's going to be like this for at least 10 years, is still kind of bulky. You know, you cannot say that wearing a virtual reality glass, even in a few days, is like nothing. It is detaching you from your environment, and you are now in this new space. It is physically and cognitively demanding. And it's the same as you did previously. Sometimes you wanted to have a long conversation with someone or a short one. You want to have an intense, you walked over someone to try to meet someone for a coffee, or you just sent a 2-minute phone call. And I think the integration of all of these into your daily life practices, I think this has not really been well. There's no seamless transition. For example, if I had a video conference with my grandparents, really exchanging on something, and then, oh, and now actually we are cooking. Are you cooking too? Yes, we are also cooking. But is there now any kind of a tool that says, okay, we feel connected while we are cooking, that we can maybe send somewhere a little ping on we are done, and then say goodnight? There's nothing like this. I have to fully switch the channel. I might then go to Skype. I might then go to WhatsApp. I might then go to whatever. I don't know. I cannot still switch on their U lamps, but I think that seamless transition isn't there today. And I'm not so much as with Google. I really like the immersion of virtual reality. I don't see myself wearing these like 8 hours a day. That's something I find too demanding for myself and also for my senses. In a sense of I want to experience is also other things. And I think many of you have experience in that, and that means you are so immersed that even the noise that is around you disappears. I would even argue maybe sometimes that the smell disappears somehow, because you are so sort of focused on that. So yes, I would say there's plenty, and the fact that there was this prototype that has once shown something doesn't make it a daily practice. And I was actually thinking of because we are talking about health today. You know, there was so many years of exertion games, Kai play, and so on, and now we bought a Ring Fit Adventure. So now sports has finally. I never bought a Wii Fit because I didn't like it, but now I have something. So I think it took a product that it make it move into my home, and I think with others it didn't. All of the prototypes I've seen, there never was a commercial product made out of that.
I think some other communication technologies, just as a counter argument, have made it into everyday life and changed it immensely. I think WhatsApp is sort of the counter example. I think it has been within a very short time really completely changed how people of all ages, and I think that's what you made this point. I think the age discrimination is probably something which is quite overrated. I think we have seen this. It is more so if people see a value, they'll use it. And I think this is this may be age dependent, the value, but I think so we have seen communication technologies where people see a real value and they change it. And I think we sometimes use this example of people find Skype really complicated till they get grandchildren. I think we have seen this in many places. If there is a need, people use technology. But Katrin,
yeah, absolutely.
Reminder, keep questions coming.
As a tiny response to that, I think I fully agree. And of course, my grandparents did a lot of that. But there is no seamless integration. If I have my phone with me, that's pretty easy, because then I can have a look at it. But then I put it somewhere, and then I go cooking. And then having a dinner with the family, and this is the time where there's no screen time on the table. So what happens to the WhatsApp messages then? Okay, one part you could say it's not necessarily I can live without an hour without WhatsApp, but there's no seamless integration into my practices. Could I say, well, if Oma, like if grandparents sends a WhatsApp, it is still something we would appreciate at the table as a family because it's a close member. There have been prototypes, but I think I don't see it. I see it has been adopted, but I don't see a seamless integration in our everyday practices.
I just had a thought when you said that we lose something like maybe the smell, etc. I just had a thought that what we also lose is the ability to be silent with somebody, I think it's not about reading WhatsApp messages, whenever they disappear. It's rather about reducing, the incoming information, but having something which I would describe as quality, and which is about silent, about non-verbal hints, a smile, and this is probably what we underlooked in technology, in communication technology, because we focus on sending messages.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I have another question on mobility, because we know that I guess everybody of us is less mobile, since everybody is more or less in any sort of home office, lockdown, etc. So as you did a lot of work about mobility, mobile HCI, and also with a focus on health, we learned in the last months, how to use technology, probably also to be more active. You mentioned that you have a new, a computer game, fitness game. So how would fitness, technology, and future come together? Is there a new direction where you think that completely, is promising?
Well, I think the lockdown had for me an interesting effect, because I was actually doing nothing. I know that a lot of colleagues actually who love running even intensified this, but I hate running, unfortunately. So I didn't do anything, and then after a few months, I sort of I cannot. I can still walk up the stairs, but I had the feeling if I have to do this like 100 times, I'm gonna be really exhausted. So looking at technology, I think we will definitely revisit a lot of the early approaches of home training, of self sort of monitoring your own activity when you move. I think we did an early Philips Hue paper on I think it was a short paper on make me move at work. So an external cue was helping you to actually see that I'm kind of sitting like this for 2 hours, and that you should get up and get yourself a coffee. And on the integration it is into your home office, because we all anticipate that there are going to be much more home office space. I see more of the work that other researchers also did, doing sports together. I think running together was something outdoors, but also inside. Can I maybe meet someone for my Zumba class, because I have more fun. My students are now watching my YouTube videos, but they're doing with Watch Together. So they're watching at the same time. So I kind of had the feeling of watching it together. I think that's doing sports together, even if I have to stay home and the other team can go to a class, will be highly exciting. Can I run with them together, even though maybe I'm under quarantine or I'm not yet vaccinated and so on? I think that is highly interesting. And we have a research project where we created active things, like little entities in your smart home that are reminding you to do mobility exercises. And these exercises doesn't have to be like these one, but can be let me see if I can do this properly, where you can do a chair rise. This is actually a classical exercise you can do, and if you do it 12 times, you still do something for your legs. And that was thought for the elderly, but looking at the Corona times, why don't I have these actually in my home? Because it would remind me at different places in my home on using mobility opportunities I actually have in my daily life. And if we have a stronger workforce at home, we definitely have to think of technology like this, not only for elderly, but for everyone, and integrate this into your lives.
I guess also to motivate us, because I also, hate that I'm not into running, which would be like perfect now, but I don't. But Albrecht, you had a question?
So I think we just got one question in, and I would basically, we switch the recording off and go to the sort of the off record